The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, good evening, it's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. A hero rises from the ashes as Mr. Johnny Bairstow takes matters into his own hands. Yet another Just Stop Oil fanatic saw it fit to disrupt the historic competition. But why? To make us cold and poor. And talking of fanatics, the Climate Change Committee has released another doom-laden report today. It claims our pursuit of net zero lacks urgency. But does it care if we're cold and poor? The government is reportedly drawing up plans to nationalise Thames Water amidst a £14 billion debt pile-up. But is this necessary, or should we leave market forces to remove the debt? I say, go with the flow. Surely you didn't think we had forgotten about our new segment, the great commercial success Sit Down with Sitwell. The man himself accompanied me to the cricket today and saw England catch protesters more easily than cricket balls. We'll be chewing through this afternoon's events, as well as some pressing cultural matters. Plus, how do you feel about those in the top 1% of earners going on strike? Well, that's exactly what's happening. NHS consultants with their average earnings last year of over £120,000 have overwhelmingly voted to engage in industrial inaction next month. They also, rather strangely, apologised for doing so. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by a pugnacious panel this evening, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and PR tycoon and former Labour councillor, Kevin Craig. As ever, I want to hear from you. It's the most important part of the programme. Email me, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's time for the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Jacob, thank you. Good evening. Let's show you pictures then that we received just about an hour ago of the wreckage from the ill-fated Titan submersible, which has been recovered from the sea floor of the North Atlantic and brought ashore for the first time. If you're watching on television, you'll be able to see these new pictures. And if you're listening on radio, they show metal debris being unloaded from the Horizon Arctic ship in St John's in Newfoundland by the Canadian Coast Guard. You can see there much of the wiring that is spewing from the internal section of the sub. It appears to show the tail cone as well, the titanium end cap, the landing frame and the porthole, so quite a bit that has been salvaged from the ocean floor. The sub imploding an hour and 45 minutes into its descent as those aboard tried to go down to view the wreckage of the Titanic on the 18th of June. All 5 souls on board perished after a catastrophic implosion underwater. Those pictures just into us an hour ago. Now, Thames Water says it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure funding amid mounting concern over its financial stability. Contingency plans are reportedly being drawn up by the government, including a possible emergency nationalisation of the company. It's feared Thames Water is £14 billion in debt. Environment Minister Rebecca Powell says their 15 million customers should rest assured their water supplies will be protected. Now, Ofcom launched an investigation today into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service, which failed at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it's going to look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecoms giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. BT, which manages the 999 phone system, apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption. Daniel Korski pulled out of the race for London Mayor today after a TV producer accused him of groping her a decade ago. In a statement, he said he's withdrawing with a heavy heart, but that he also categorically denies the allegations. Daisy Goodwin made the formal complaint, with Number 10 commenting it was very serious and urging any other complainants to come forward. Mr Korski said the pressure on his family and the inability to get a fair hearing for his message made it impossible for his campaign to continue. Hundreds of steelworkers were protesting today outside Parliament. The GMB union said almost 80% of jobs in the entire steel sector had gone over the last 40 years. Workers are now calling for a proper industrial strategy and relief from energy costs. The government said it is working closely with the sector to secure a sustainable, decarbonised and competitive future for steel. And 3 people were arrested today after Just Stop Oil protesters disrupted the second Ashes Test match at Lord's Cricket Ground by running onto the pitch. England wicketkeeper Johnny Bairstow took matters into his own hands by picking up a protester who'd been attempting to throw orange paint powder onto the pitch. Bairstow carried him off towards the grandstand to loud applause. Another protester was removed by the security team and ground staff managed to clear away the paint that was spilled. Just Stop Oil say they disrupted the match to demand action from the government on climate change. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Today was not the day for teddy bears picnics, but for fanatics. At the Ashes, the Just Stop Oil Brigade momentarily stopped play. The hero of the hour was Johnny Bairstow, who removed one protester and dropped him over the boundary rope as you might send rubbish down a waste disposal chute. Have a look. The cheer from the crowd was, I think, well-deserved. But the Just Stop Oil Brigade aren't the only fanatics. The Climate Change Committee, published its report today. It wants to make us cold and poor urgently. The committee has not noticed that our efforts to reduce carbon dioxide have already been successful. We've done so much more than other wealthy nations. But they're constantly undermined by China, which produces emissions faster than we reduce them. We are damaging our own economy with the 3rd highest energy prices, making British industry less competitive. We're also increasing our emissions by not exploring our own gas and oil reserves in the North Sea and indeed through fracking. What we're doing is making people poorer, and this will get worse through the ban on gas boilers in new builds by 2025. And no one else is following our ban on new petrol and diesel cars in 2030. Even the EU, which we left because it was such a regulatory mess, has delayed it to 2035. And we get confusing messages. We keep on being told one thing and then it changes. Who now remembers that we were told we ought to have diesel cars? The great diesel scandal that started in 2001 in the interest of reducing carbon dioxide emissions. In 2001, the Labour Chancellor, Gordon Brown, changed the tax system, intending to protect the environment by encouraging the purchase of diesel cars. But now they're saying that diesel cars should pay ULEZ charges, and the same's happening with hybrids. They used to be the panacea, but today's papers reported that hybrids should be phased out for whatever reason. The reason is the Greens have changed their mind. The government institutions have got so much wrong on this, and as they've got it wrong before, how should we trust them now? I don't want to be cold and poor, and I assume you don't either. But I always want to know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. But as we're a channel that's in favour of free speech, I'm delighted to be joined by Just Stop Oil supporter Dr. Kushnekar, who I hope may try and defend the ridiculous behaviour at Lords today. What possible service did that provide to anybody?
Well, Jacob, you just described the Independent Climate Change Committee as fanatical, and you described Just Stop Oil as fanatical. What is fanatical about wanting a livable future? What is fanatical about saying that we need to end new oil and gas? That is the exact same thing that is being said by the United Nations, by the International Energy Agency, by the IPCC. You seem to be one of the only people who seems to think that we need new oil and gas.
We're going to have new oil and gas.
I wonder why that might be.
We're going to have new oil and gas, whether it comes from the UK or it comes from Saudi Arabia and Russia. You want to make the Saudis and the Russians rich.
No, literally in today's Climate Change Committee report, it says that we will need oil and gas for years to come until we get to net zero. But that does not justify new oil developments.
And we should have our own source resources.
I'm saying that we need to reduce the amount of oil and gas that we're using so that we can use the oil and gas that we've got.
We should use our own supplies. But what were your fanatical What were your fanatical friends at the cricket doing this morning? What possible benefit did that have? That just makes you look like Looney Tunes, doesn't it?
Well, it's got me talking on this programme today.
Yeah, but it hasn't won you any support. You were roundly booed at Lords, and Johnny Bairstow, who dropped that hooligan over the boundary, was widely cheered.
Well, would you like to talk about how important action on the climate crisis is? Because that's what I'm here to talk about.
We're delighted that you're here, but what I'm saying is that we can't just wish the end without practical means, and we can't get to the end by making people cold and poor.
My job is to protect the health of my patients and the health of the population.
Well, I hope you're not going on strike, which most of the doctors seem to be doing.
We know that new oil and gas is the biggest threat to health that we are going to see in our lifetimes.
But you've just contradicted yourself, because a moment ago you accepted we were going to need oil and gas for many decades to come. Where's that coming from if we're not allowed to get new oil and gas? We need the supplies. That's part of the transition.
No, we need to reduce demand. We need to reduce our dependence and our addiction on fossil fuels.
But we might as well have a domestic supply as a foreign supply. That's good for the British economy. It actually reduces emissions because it doesn't have to be transported.
We need to stop the supply of oil and gas while we transition to a just
Well, a moment ago you said you wanted to reduce the demand.
We need to rely on wind, on solar, on
but
hydro.
We haven't got there yet. And when the wind doesn't blow, do you want our lights to go out?
Jacob, how much money have you got invested in oil and gas?
Me, I don't have any money invested in oil and gas. Your cheap tricks to try and assume people are talking their own books just wrong. So that was a mistake. That's almost as silly as your protest at Lords.
Oil and gas that you take dividends from, including Russian gas companies?
I didn't take any dividends from Russian gas companies. That's just a lie. So you want to come on here and tell lies? Why don't you stick to the facts?
It was widely reported that Somerset Capital has got money in Russian gas companies that you took £600,000 in dividends from.
Just because things are reported doesn't make them true, and Somerset Capital does not invest its own money. It has clients. So I don't have any money in Russian oil and gas. That was a lie. Very nice to have you. Continue your foolish protests, because you make the argument for net zero worse. Your fanatics do real damage to a case that has some logic behind it in other areas. But I'm very pleased to have William Sitwell with me today, because, William, you were at Lords today. You saw the protest. You saw the cheer that Johnny Bairstow got when he dropped the protester over the boundary. Actually, they do themselves more harm than good, don't they, by behaving in this way?
Yeah, and I was at the cricket with you, funnily enough.
That's right.
It was quite a useful moment because it stirred us from catching up, and reading the paper and just having a cup of coffee. And it's become a rather affectionate moment in national life. They have the national anthem, and if you're at the cricket or if you're at the snooker, Just Stop Oil parade, do their parade with their orange dust, and it rather lit up the ground. People were a bit sort of snoozy at the beginning of a day at Lord's. But I'm afraid, your guest is right. I mean, we're now talking about it. They're trying to, by carrying out what you call foolish stunts, they end up on the news discussing their serious points. And I suppose that these protesters would always say, if you've got to run in front of a horse or make a fool of yourself to be able to make people think about a particular issue. I mean, they're not going to convince the white middle-class male-dominated audience at Lord's, but they will be on the front pages of the newspapers.
They'll be on the front page, but actually I don't think they make the argument for net zero come faster, because they make people think that all the people arguing for this are strange people who throw paint. And there are some quite serious people involved in this argument, some serious scientists. And the aim of net zero is not in itself a bad one, but they undermine the credibility, I think, of the whole academic argument for net zero by their fanaticism.
Yeah, because people just think they're pests.
That's right.
If they stop people going to work, if they stop people enjoying a national pastime.
And it's not just the cricket audience, because they've been doing it, stopping children getting to school, stopping people getting to hospital appointments, even people who've been very ill not getting to hospital. And I think that undermines the whole green agenda.
I mean, what it did was stir the crowd into a sort of patriotic fervour. When Johnny Bairstow picked him up, carried him across the pitch, it was really moving.
Because he carried him quite a long way.
Yeah, he was quite strong.
50 yards or something.
Absolutely, and the crowd were really behind him. And then he went off, I think, probably to get some of the orange dust off his pads or something, and he got the most enormous roar on the way back. But as I say, it's not about the audience at Lord's, it's about getting on the news.
But you've been very interesting, your expertise is as a food critic, on food and net zero, and people have been saying you should eat less meat and you should be vegan and so on. But you'd contest that, wouldn't you? You think that veganism is not a route to net zero?
Well, I think we're going to probably talk about this in due course, but I do agree. I mean, I also think that I completely respect people's lifestyle choices, but I think it's very difficult to cope with people forcing their viewpoints on you. And I think there's a lot of problems with vegan lifestyles in terms of health and in terms of their claims about climate change. Because, of course, monogamous monoculture that you create in terms of crops like soybeans and so on are responsible for depleting rainforests, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of worrying aspects of the climate debate when it comes to a strictly vegan diet. But my view is, I think the more variety in a diet, the better. And you should never have a sort of monogrammed single thing that you eat.
But like the protest at the cricket, when you get people making extreme arguments, it opens the way for people who are sceptical about the need for dramatic change to say, well, look, the only people really asking for this are protesters, are paint throwers, and therefore let's just carry on as we are. Let's actually make sure our economy is competitive and efficient. And to that extent, what happened today is actually damaging for the Just Stop Oil people.
I think most people see it as a fringe event that's not about them and their lives, that's a sort of comedy element that they see everywhere. And you see it across social media, and it antagonises people. But as you suggest, I don't think it tackles any of the arguments. What it does is it irritates people and it upsets people. People have paid quite a lot of money to have a nice, peaceful day at the cricket. I mean, it disrupted it for about 3 minutes.
It didn't last very long. Actually, the slow over-rate can't be blamed on the protest.
Exactly.
And the slow over-rate is another discussion. And the ground staff got rid of them very quickly. And indeed, the teams, the Australians as well, got rid of one of the other protesters. So it was a pretty efficient effort to clear the pitch up.
We were cheering on the guy with his gigantic hoover.
That's right. The ground staff came on with a vast hoover and the paint was soon cleared up.
It was very impressive. And I think, obviously, they wanted to get onto the actual wicket. And I don't think they expected the team members to actually be the first line of defence. I think they felt that the cricketers themselves would probably allow them to get to the crease, but they didn't. And what Bairstow did was an act of, great heroism. It really was. It was good to see, because no one knows how they behave in a moment of crisis. And now we know that when You know, when stuff hits the fan, Bairstow's our man. There he is.
For the last test, everyone was talking about whether Bairstow was taking all the catches. Now they're talking about him catching protesters. So you've got a very key catch today. Anyway, thank you to Kush and thank you, William. William will be back in a moment. Don't forget to let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. And coming up, Thames Water may be going bust, but this will make no difference to your water supplies, and the government must not nationalise it. Plus, Deliveroo has devised a plan to disguise vegetables so that via virtual reality they taste like your preference of steak, cream eggs, or even foie gras. I'll be making a meal of this with former MasterChef judge William Sitwell.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. You've been getting in touch with your thoughts, or I hope you have. I haven't actually been given any of them, but I'm sure they're brilliant thoughts. But businesses, talking of Thames Water, have a balance sheet made up of debt and equity and a profit and loss account from the revenue of sales set against the cost of doing business. If a company has too much debt on its balance sheet, the interest payment will affect the profit and loss account. And the solution is to reduce the debt, to reduce the interest. The debt can be reduced by raising equity, that's selling more shares, selling assets, or bankruptcy. But bankruptcy does not affect the underlying activity if that itself is profitable. And Thames Water, therefore, does not need to be nationalised because the supply of water in itself is profitable. Thames Water 2021-22 had an EBITDA of £1.1 billion. Now, let me explain what EBITDA is. It's earning before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortisation. Taxes, you know what they are. Interest relates to your debt. If you go bust, you have no money to pay on your debt, but you still have the business. Depreciation and amortisation, well, they're usually held in the debt because that's money you've already spent. So if you're making £1.1 billion before taxes, you have a good, solid business which can be sold by the liquidator, who will, in the interim, carry on running the business until a buyer is found. And this is fundamental, because some people may think that they won't be getting their water supplies if Thames Water goes bust. That is not the case. There is no reason for that to happen. If you're a shareholder in Thames Water, or if you own any of the debt of Thames Water, you should be worried. But if you're a customer, you shouldn't be. And there's no need for the government to get involved. This can just take place in normal market mechanisms. But I'm joined to discuss this further by the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the PR tycoon, Kevin Craig. Kevin, I know you socialists always want to nationalise everything, but there can't be any reason to nationalise Thames Water, can there?
I think, Jacob, you've just made a very articulate case for why perhaps bankruptcy is not so bad, and the only people who need to worry are people who Thames Water owes money to or shareholders. I would go back a step and say, actually, the big problem here is that too much money was taken out of that business to lead us to a roughly 80% gearing, which is on the company value. So the money they owe is about 80% what the company's worth. And there are lots of normal people, us, viewers and listeners, who might have shares in Thames Water who will suffer because of this. And basically, if you believe in capitalism, which the modern Labour Party does for its ability to create wealth and jobs, you don't want a model of capitalism where basically unaccountable folks can take out money and strip the company and cause this uncertainty. It's not fair.
But in a way, the only people they've taken money out from are bankers who have lent them the money, who will then lose the debt. This isn't a loss to their customers.
But what about the people who own shares in the business?
Well, in any shareholding operation, you will have a different variety of risk appetite. And
You
some
should be
companies...
wearing a Stetson, that attitude. That's the Wild West.
No, it's not. That when you buy shares, you will buy high-risk companies that have a lot of debt on them, and you will buy low-risk companies that have no debt, and you will try and balance your portfolio. Surely, Kelvin, that's what any investor does.
Right. Well, I think there's two points. I vaguely agree with Kevin, and I come slightly away from it. Look, I quite understand this is a profitable business being wholly mismanaged.
Yes.
Actually, has it been criminally mismanaged? That's the real issue. Have they known? They were working on the assumption, we're laughing here, interest rates are staying as low as this, we'll never have to pay. We'll be laughing. We've got enough money.
Yeah.
Then the world, as the world has turned loads of times over the last 50, 100 years, right, up goes the interest rates. What happens? CEO bails, and suddenly you find even water, which everybody needs, turns out to be a difficult area of business. It's impossible.
But this is really important, because if interest rates going up doesn't force bad companies into bankruptcy, there's no point in putting up interest rates. The ability of the Bank of England to change the money supply, to tackle inflation, only works if badly run companies like Thames Water get into difficulties.
Right, OK, so then you have a situation where actually some clever people, right, have taken all the money, out. They took all the money out and they said, I tell you what, we've got a pliant management, because they're basically a version of private equity. It was Macquarie's. We will stuff a load of debt in there. And by the way, having taken all the money out, we don't face a risk as a shareholder, either because we've buggered off or because actually we've got all our money out and all we leave behind is this husk of a company.
That's not right. The shareholder, with a 14 billion bankruptcy, will lose all the equity value. That will go...
Their equity, they don't care. They've already taken their investment out.
I know everyone always cares about the equity, because the equity...
No, they do not. Honestly, I totally disagree with you about that.
At 0.1% interest rates, the equity was very valuable. So the equity holders have, in the last 2 years, lost a great deal of equity value, haven't they, Ken?
Yeah, but what about this money? What about this debt that was accumulated? And what about the dividends that were taken out of the business? If that capital was still there now, we wouldn't be in this situation, don't you think?
Well, but they have been investing £1 to £2 billion a year as well. So, yes, they've taken some money out of business. That's absolutely true.
Over the years,
but they've also been investing, and you won't get people to invest unless they think they can get a return. They've got their calculations wrong. They've run the business badly. But that's capitalism.
I totally agree. I totally agree. But here you have water, which Even I, I've been in business, I've had good times, I've had bad times. Even I take the view that water is not something which should be speculated to 100% of speculation.
But actually, the bankruptcy ought to make water in London cheaper because the water company now doesn't have to service £14 billion worth of debt.
But should do. Do you think that's the likely outcome? I've just read the front page of the Times that says, in fact, water costs are going to go up by 40%.
But that's a different issue,
It is a different issue, but
on
no
this,
point you saying it's going to be cheaper when, in fact, the only facts that we seem to know is that
that's
water's going to go
on
up.
a different investment programme. But you take £14 billion out, off what allows a return on capital. It's not quite as simple as that, but that's its basic approach. You take 14 billion of the capital out, Thames Water's return ought to go down very, very significantly, and therefore water prices ought at least to stabilise or allow this investment.
Well, I take
or
your
allow
point.
this investment
I am
to be made
not in
outright.
favour of it going into the state hands, right? I agree with you. It should be treated just as any form of either administration or not really liquidation, but any form of administration. However, you can't complain if socialists say, well, actually, you had to go. Look what you've done. By the way, look what you've done to the people who hold the debt. Look what you've done to people who've come along.
They knew the risks.
They plundered the place. The shareholders have plundered it and then legged it. And by the way, I am a capitalist.
The debt owners don't deserve any sympathy. They're professionals. They know what they're doing.
But
do they know?
I think what people will feel is that there needs to be, and this is a Labour proposal, you need to not allow companies to rack up debt like this if it's got nothing to do with the provision of a better service.
Well, they have built the sewer around London, biggest sewer since the Victorian times.
Yeah, that's a good piece of infrastructure.
And that was billions. Yeah. And that's still there, you see.
It didn't need to bankrupt the business. My worry is, I mean, it's a very, very. I think I would characterise your position as ultra-libertarian on this one. Let the company fail. Start again.
Because we'll still get the water. That's the key. Well, if there were any risk to water supplies, it'd be different. But there's no reason for the water supplies not to carry on flowing. Thank you to my panel, who will be back with me later in the programme. Coming up, will AI turn your chips into fish and fish into chips and who knows what? As nobody ever sees a consultant, they're either on committees or playing golf, will they be noticed if they down scalpels?
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. I remain Jacob Rees-Mogg, and you've been getting in touch with your thoughts, and this time you really have. Derek, hand over the management of water to the beavers. They have better water management systems than the arid brains of the water companies. Peter from Bath, who obviously knows all about water because of the great springs there, and it's in God's own county of Somerset. When Rishi has lost the next election and is forced to resign, I sincerely hope he gives Mr Bairstow a gong in his honours list for his service to the British public. Well, hear to that. And Simon, renationalisation would be entirely sensible. Those who have made vast profits should be forced to give the money back to pay for the improvements needed. Maybe that bankruptcy would do that in effect anyway. The rise of artificial intelligence has taken another extraordinary turn. Reports today say that by 2040, our food habits could be directed by this futuristic robot technology. Personal devices such as smartphones could be enabled with technology to analyse health just by breathing and then creating hyper-personalised diet plans. It may even be able to change what your food tastes like. So you eat your vegetables because they're meant to be good for you, but it'll taste like something nice using virtual reality, and it could make you feel that you were in the hospitality of a rustic eatery when you were in fact sitting at home munching through a plateful of rabbit food, which sounds as if it could be quite fun, but it might deprive you of the pleasure of going out to a restaurant, the service and the hospitality that goes with that. So should we be concerned about the possibility of digitally enhanced eating, or will it be a groundbreaking development in improving public health? Well, I'm rejoined now by food critic and Telegraph writer, William Sitwell. William, you go to more restaurants than most people, you review them. Do you think we'll be satisfied if instead of having the restaurant experience, we just sit at home, put a headset on, eat a carrot and think we're munching foie gras in Wilton's?
Well, obviously not. And as you say, I eat in a lot of restaurants and it's my job to do so. And, you know, I see a lot of digital innovation coming. And if there's one thing that I would like to happen in the future, I'd like to see restaurants have telephones. You know, I'd like to be able to call up a restaurant to make a booking. I don't want to have to go online the whole time. I want to be able to ring up a restaurant and say that I'm running late rather than having to log on and modify my restaurant reservation and then get a load of sort of text messages back, also asking me if I want to, you know, give them the benefit of what I've thought about the restaurant. I was, you know, obviously if I was going to say that, I'd say, oh, don't worry, wait until you see it in print. You know, eating out in restaurants is essentially the food aside and the atmosphere and everything else. It's about communing with other people. The one thing you don't want to do when you turn up in a restaurant is be forced to get out your telephone and zap a QR code so you can order your wine or your menu from your phone. It's about putting electronic devices away. It's about talking to the person, either a business meeting, looking someone in the eye, a loved one. It's about leaving the cares of the world aside. And, you know, I was speaking to an amazing restaurateur in Auckland, New Zealand the other day, a great man called Al Brown. And he said to me, the key thing to understand about restaurant goers is when they walk into a restaurant, they're full of anxiety. Am I going to like the food? Am I going to like the wine? Is my table going to be decent? And it's about calming that anxiety, giving people water immediately. At his restaurant Depot in Auckland, he brings people water immediately, then he brings them some hummus and a dip. The one thing they might be worried about is, am I paying for this? You need to calm people. And the idea that you want to put on headphones, I mean, Heston did it with his Sounds of the Sea dish at the Fat Duck, where you had food and an egg in a huge, great conch, and you listen to the noise of crashing water, and it sort of messes with your mind and influences your taste. dinner for two at the Fat Duck these days, and a friend of mine went the other day, can cost about £1,200. So there's room for theatrics and all that sort of thing. But what we want, essentially, at the end of the day, is that cheeky little place where we're known when we walk in, where there's a little table in the corner, where it's affordable, where it's fun, accessible, and where we can have conversations.
But it's about service, isn't it? That it's about being welcomed, and this goes from the moment you ring up and book the table, and they say, we're so looking forward to seeing you again, or welcome back, and then when you arrive, everything running smoothly, and that requires people rather than mechanics. But also this idea that the food you eat should have its taste adjusted through AI, through mind signals. That's almost sinister, isn't it?
Listen, it'll happen, and if people want to have that theatrical experience, then they can enjoy that. If people want to put on goggles...
I think Deliveroo is saying they'll do it for you at home.
Listen, Deliveroo will do anything they can in order to get PR, and here we are talking about the Deliveroo survey today. You look at it, just stop oil, throw orange powder on the pitch.
They get publicity.
Lords, they get publicity, this is all part of the PR game. But there are some interesting things that come out of this. I think, the innovation in food is going to be things like, salad leaves that are grown using just water in these vertical towers. The ability to grow salads and in your own home in sort of mini fridges and that sort of stuff. What you can do with composting. I think one of the greatest innovations of food will be insect-based foods, because if we can use insects who can live off waste, food waste, and then we can turn those insects into biscuits and use those insects as protein rather than beef, and we can put it in burgers where people who are eating burgers don't care where their food comes from, then those are the sort of innovations that we want to see. I actually quite like...
I'd rather have AI food that made me think a carrot was roast beef than to eat a few insects and think it was roast beef.
But there's nothing wrong with eating insects. I mean, we eat lobster, we eat crustacea from the sea, but these are forms of insects. I've eaten a gold speckled grasshopper with some avocado on toast, and it was very delicious.
It's absolutely disgusting. I should never wish to eat a grasshopper again.
Jacob, you don't eat garlic. I mean, the only thing you can have is peas and gravy and a shepherd's pie.
I don't like peas either.
You don't even like mustard.
No, I don't.
Exactly.
I like proper English food. But leaving my dietary habits to one side, I think this is a pretty dystopian vision, actually, of people eating a lot of vegetables and flies. Can't we just have proper food? And you're very keen on people having food that's sourced locally. And of course, you live in Somerset, and so there's the advantage of having food that is grown near you. It's much harder when you're in a town.
It's harder in the city, but if you shop using independent butchers, and you can have conversations with those butchers and ask them where the food comes from, then you're one step closer. Yeah, sure, not everyone has the privilege of living in the countryside and being able to shop in a farmer's market, but the mantra, which has become a cliche because it's so often repeated, will always be the case. If you can eat locally and seasonally, then you're going to get as close as you can to a sustainable, regular, varied diet.
All right, it's very good, but isn't this very expensive? And that actually,
not at all.
We need to ensure that people can, particularly in time of rising inflation, have affordable food, and affordable food is mass-produced.
Right now, if meat costs are soaring because of the costs of fuel for farm machinery, etc., it doesn't cost very much to eat vegetables. This is the greatest time in history for vegetarianism because carrots, peas, potatoes, all these things do not cost very much money. Lord Woolton, the great Minister of Food during the Second World War...
You wrote a book on.
I did. That's not just the reason why I mentioned it.
Very good book,
Thank you very much. But his Woolton pie made a virtue of the ration, made a virtue of the fact that you can do all sorts of wonderful things with vegetables. We eat too much protein. I'm in favour of meat-free Mondays. I'm in favour of occasionally delving into the vegan world to see how you can vary your diet. If you stop meat for a bit, it encourages you to eat fish. If you stop drinking red wine, it makes you think more about white wine. If you occasionally stop, it actually opens the door to a whole plethora of new foods. And the food world is so wonderful that you can travel around the world in your own home using supermarkets, which today supply an array of food that was never possible in the past. And it enables you to travel around the world culturally. And the more varied diet, the better. So I would never preach at anyone, keep enjoying it.
I'm not sure I'm going to go for too varied a diet. I like to get my roast beef regularly. But thank you very much, William. Coming up, unlucky strikes. But will anyone notice if consultants down scalpels?
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I continue to identify as Jacob Rees-Mogg, and you've been getting in touch with your thoughts. Great one from Philip. When does William get his own show on GB News? Well, that's not for me to decide, but he'd be very good. Alexander, you've hit the nail on the head. Jacob, wouldn't you want an AI Tornadoes Rossini? It is one of my favourite dishes, ideally with pommes soufflé, which are perfect. Anyway, leaving that to one side. Sophie, Aldous Huxley left this part out of Brave New World. Yes, I think that may be true. Let's perhaps eat proper food. Moving on. Back in April, when the junior doctors went on strike for a 35% pay rise, we explained on this programme that junior doctors' salaries after 1 year of graduation exceeded that of those who studied veterinary, nursing, engineering, economics, physics, maths, computing, chemistry, politics, business languages, geography, law, history, biosciences, philosophy, teaching, sociology, English and psychology. Not a bad hand to be dealt in the grand scheme of things. But lo, it came to pass. It's not just junior doctors who have voted to strike now, it's senior doctors too. The British Medical Association members overwhelmingly voted in favour of strike action, with the senior doctors engaging in their industrial inaction for 24 hours, succeeding a 5-day junior doctor strike in mid-July. The BMA committee chairman, Dr Vishal Sharma, speaking to the BBC today, rather oddly apologised for the disruption, of which he is a key orchestrator, but then went on rather unreflectively to add that it is a sad indictment of the government. Surely it's a sad indictment of him. He also promised that they would do everything they could to keep patients safe. Well, if you need any advice, I'd say the best place to start to keep patients safe is not going on strike. For context, during 2022, the average NHS consultant earned over £126,000. That puts them in the top 1% of earners in this country. I'm not sure how much more they expect to get. I'm rejoined by my distinguished panel, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and PR tycoon Kevin Craig. Kelvin, you're a great one for supporting strikers, aren't you?
Yes, I do that. What the consultants have now done is they've basically decided that I think they've looked at the RMT and they've decided, do you know what, we don't care what the basis of the strike is, we're just going to get involved and make some more money. One of the aspects that gets lost in all this is they get a pension payments of 20% from the NHS. It's our money, but it's our money. My answer to this is, by all means, let's have a two-tier system. Because the NHS cannot afford all these huge payments. They've been offered, by the way, 6%, and the junior doctors 6% and £1,000. It is an act, I think, of nastiness. I think it's an act against the patients, right? The idea that they care for these people actually gets lost in the wash. What they're saying is more and more of you will be waiting for hips, knees, any form of elective surgery. It is, honestly, I could weep for the taxpayer who has to fund this kind of attitude. I get loads of tweets from people saying two things. Doctors saying, I carry out oncology, come and watch me work. I don't say that they haven't got tough jobs. I don't know whether this guy who invited me to go and watch him at work is any good or not. I'm not somebody to challenge him. What I do challenge him is they don't actually value the patients anymore. What they say is, look, this is a world where if you don't do what the RMT do, you're going to get left behind.
Kevin, how can you justify when you've got £126,000 a year, you've taken the Hippocratic Oath, going on strike?
Well, the comments by the leader today, you characterised them as contradictory. He was saying that he regrets strike action. I mean, effectively what they've gone to is a Christmas weekend service. And I just think there's a very different way of looking at this compared to how you both are. I know people are frustrated, but long term, you know, doctor pay has stagnated. I'm interested in why we get so upset that consultant lifesavers who only get to that money after 26 years in the job, and we don't have any of the same moral outrage for the vast sums being earned moving money from A to B around the other parts of our economy.
I wouldn't be sympathetic if they went on strike. I think that was pretty stupid. If your bankers don't go on strike, do they? Because they know they're well paid.
Well, I think the point about the strike is that the government's failed to engage in meaningful discussions in this. You've been too busy changing prime ministers every 5 minutes. You know, that's the problem.
Right, that is a funny line, but it is not the problem here. They know, the consultants know...
They're not Mick Lynch either. Come on, Kelvin.
They have become... But they have definitely decided, the doctors, and this is it's a shock to me, absolute shock. But, by the way, a shock to a patient who now sees this pain is going to extend it for another 6 to 9 months. And by the way, does the consultant care? And has the consultant ever cared? That's my real point now.
They do, Kelvin.
I don't know. I don't know consultants.
Well,
so I don't know.
What's your experience been of consultants in this country? You must have
when I pay them, they're all over me. But when I had to go to one recently, locally, he was a senior registrar, was not a consultant, by the way, couldn't give a damn, and his only interest was, you are my last patient ever at this hospital, I'm off to Guy's. So I had to pay for a consultant to explain to me what the senior registrar said. That was 250 quid, by the way.
Well, in my experience and many others, NHS consultants, they do care about their patients.
But that's what so surprises me, because actually, I agree with your experience. The consultants that I've met over the years are really hard-working, dedicated people. How could they possibly do this when they're not badly paid? I can understand people on the minimum wage in an inflationary era feeling that they've got no choice but to withdraw their labour. But if you're really well paid, you know the country is facing economic headwinds, and you know that patients, because of COVID, are facing and have faced long delays. Surely the last thing you do is go on strike.
It's very difficult, you know, and that's why the guy made those comments. I mean, my view would be that they are deeply concerned about the impact of strikes, but they just can't get the government to listen, and, you know, they're not going to expect their full pay demand. And I know that consultants are, compared to an average salary, very well paid, but you don't get there until nearly 3 decades.
I understand that. But it's the timing of the strike. And to Kelvin's point, they're trying to do it when they think there's the biggest opportunity, because everybody else is. If they were to be arguing for a pay rise in a couple of years' time, when the economy has settled down, then they'd be in so much stronger moral position, I would have thought.
Well, I think they refrained for a long time from undertaking this action. Look, nobody wants it, and I do understand the frustrations. I mean, I just wanted to add a bit of balance to the characterisation of their motives.
And I think that's important.
But I do get the frustration. I do get that you know, somebody's operation has been moved or postponed. I mean, interestingly, it's the same people, isn't it? The ones doing the private work are 2 days a week private, 3 NHS, or vice versa in our system. So they're the same people that you deal with.
They are, and this is the other thing, is they know what capitalism looks like. Their private work, they want to charge me 250 quid for 20 minutes, concentrated thought process, right? Actually, funnily enough, at the same time, hold on a second, I'm making at least that while I'm working for the NHS. No, it's not enough. I can't understand. Why don't they simply say, why don't we have a two-tier health system in our country?
But isn't this the bigger conversation, that actually the private consultancy work is quite a good model and is being used to reduce the backlogs, and perhaps we should move more to that and then have more of a provision of service that is then paid for by the state, not worry whether it's private or public when it's provided.
I think there's an interesting discussion to be had that as long as the NHS remains free at the point of views, you shouldn't be too ideological about how we make it better, because whatever your politics at the minute, that system is under stress, and it's about how we make it better with the resources we've got.
Well, that's a brilliant point on which to end, because I entirely agree with Kevin. So this is broadly coming to the end of today's programme, but I'm handing over to the great Professor Daniel Wootton. Daniel, you're not going on strike, are you?
No, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'd quite like to, but no, I do not believe in these strikes. Jacob, we've got a very big show ahead. Discussing, and I'm sure you disagree with this, but are the Conservatives facing an extinction-level event? And is Rishi Sunak just acting defeated after that performance in PMQs today? Christine Hamilton, Nigel Nelson and Adam Brooks on the Superstar panel, plus Jim Davidson in the House and Paul Burrell, who will be revealing some exclusive information about a legal battle with Prince Harry.
Well, thank you for that. As people think I'm a dinosaur, I've been extinct for millions of years already, but I'm still going strong as a Tory. I'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation, and let's hope it's sunny at Lord's and in Somerset tomorrow.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Whilst it was northern and western areas that saw the bulk of the rain throughout Wednesday, it's going to be southern and eastern areas that start off with it on Thursday. It's all due to this cold front that is slowly sinking its way southeastwards across the country during the overnight period. So parts of England and Wales starting to see outbreaks of rain. Some of those could be heavy across parts of Lincolnshire down into East Anglia as we head into the late evening and the early hours of Thursday morning. Over to the west and north, starting to see some drier and clearer intervals developing, a scattering of showers across the western areas of Scotland, but many staying dry. It's here in the west where we'll see the fresher temperatures overnight around 10-12 degrees Celsius, but in the southeast holding up around 17-18 degrees in a few spots, so quite humid and muggy night to come here. That rain slowly clearing its way off could take into the afternoon before it properly clears off parts of southeast Kent and Essex, but elsewhere it will turn into a day of sunshine and showers. Parts of eastern Scotland down into eastern England could see some heavy showers in there with some thunderstorms in the mixture, but where you see the sunshine feeling relatively pleasant, highs around 20-22 degrees Celsius. That clear spells mean that we'll have some late evening sunshine as well into Thursday evening, and most places should stay dry. Still, some showers filtering their way across the Highlands into the northern hours again, could be quite heavy in places. And then into the early hours of Friday, we start watching as this band of rain is going to slowly push its way in from the west. Skies turning grey across Northern Ireland, Wales, southwest England, and then some heavy outbreaks of rain possible across western Scotland as we head throughout the day as well. Generally eastern, southern eastern areas staying drier but relatively cloudy. Low pressure is staying with us into the weekend as well, and those isobars are squeezing together as well, so the weekend could turn into quite a breezy one with brisk winds in places, further showers, longer spells of rain as well. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.